Welcome back, everyone. Craig here. So today I wanted to talk about something that sort of came up in a Twitter discussion recently, and it was sort of a debate between contraception and NFP and whether they're fundamentally different from each other, and specifically whether the intentions of the parties or the couples are different. Um, I know a lot of people argue that the intentions of those who use birth control is fundamentally different and bad compared to those who, let's say, use natural family planning to space out their children. And I tend to think that the at least it can be that the motivations and intentions can be exactly the same to be able to have sexual intimacy in your marriage without getting pregnant and perhaps for good reasons. I don't think that it stands that simply because you're using an illicit or improper method of family planning, such as birth control, that I don't think that follows that your motivations or intentions are necessarily bad. Now, it can still be a sinful act. That's not what I'm saying, but with respect to the intentions of the parties and the goals, I think for the most part they're the same or can be the same. A couple, let's say, that has 4 or 5 kids and just needs a break and has, let's say, a good or grave reason, whatever standard you want to apply, whether they use contraception or NFP, the goal and the intentions and the justifications can be exactly the same. It just turns out that one method is a, is acceptable and one method is not. And coincidentally, the method that is accepted is very difficult, um, results in less sex, at least potentially, rather than more sex, and has either a higher failure rate or user failure rate in that people give in and tend to have more kids on natural family planning than I would say with contraception. Now, maybe those are just coincidental, but I suspect that they're not. I suspect it's not coincidental that NFP is allowed and contraception is not, because NFP is just involves a lot more suffering, a lot less sex, and a lot more children for the most part. But if we just focus again on the intentions or goals of the parties, they seem to be the same. And as a thought exercise, I'd like to know why. Let's just apply the quote unquote grave reason standard or whatever it is under Humanae Vitae. I'm not entirely sure what the grave reason actually qualifies for. Not what is a grave reason, although I think that's a debatable and uncertain question. But more specifically, what does grave reason either allow you to do or excuse you from doing that you either must do or can't do if you don't have a grave reason? And I've never really gotten a good, clear answer to that. But let's just assume that everyone can agree on what's a grave reason that couples, have a, non insignificant financial, emotional, spiritual, whatever reason for avoiding pregnancy, and that the church would acknowledge they have a good reason not to get pregnant right now. And yet so the couple is not obligated to procreate, and in fact, I would argue may be obligated not to procreate if you take seriously the notion of responsible parenting. But under that standard, the couple is morally permitted not to procreate, not to have children, and presumably not obligated to engage in the conjugal act during fertile times. So, with that in mind, if they're under no obligation to procreate and under no obligation to engage in the conjugal act at all, it's confusing as to why one method is acceptable and the other method is not, when the couple is not obligated to procreate in the first place. And that is supposed to be the reason for why the church teaches that contraception is wrong, is that it ends cuts off the procreative potential of the conjugal act. But if the couple doesn't need to satisfy the procreative potential at all, it's just unclear why they can't engage in the conjugal act while also removing the procreative potential by whatever means necessary. Let's say as long as it's not abortifacient. I don't think teleology or natural law has a really good explanation for that. I know people try, but I don't think they're very persuasive. And what it amounts to, for the most part, is couples decide, are they willing to endure the difficulties of NFP, or do they give in and just have more kids, even if they really don't want to or shouldn't, or do they resort to contraception anyway or some other combination? I think that is a really important issue that needs to be addressed more clearly and explained more fully. And so I would simply ask, why why is this, let's say, more simplistic approach not a reasonable approach for these kinds of matters? And let's just, what if it was this? Couples, when they get married, take a vow, and we do all take a vow if you get married in a Catholic marriage, Catholic wedding, have a duty to be open. I think welcome children lovingly from God, and raise them in the faith. I think that's kind of the one vow that deals with this. You have an obligation to welcome children lovingly from God, but there's no specific number, and the church already recognizes that there can be good reason not to have more children. What if we just simply applied across the board a grave reason standard, or whatever the standard is, and then once a couple has satisfied that, why not leave it to the individual discretion of the couple to decide what's the best way for them to accomplish that? Maybe for some couples it is natural family planning. Maybe for some couples it's contraception, or maybe for some couples it's a combination. Again, I understand fully that the church does not recognize that standard, and what I'm saying is not, let's say, quote unquote, the approved approach to this. I recognize that, but this is simply a thought exercise and a discussion. And I'd like someone to argue why, explain more fully why the approach that I've laid out is somehow so contrary to natural law or good reason, and why God would find that approach offensive. Because um, I think it would eliminate the vast majority of the problems, or negative things that we attribute to contraception within Catholic marriage. And I think for the most part, most couples can navigate that in a prudential way and have a marriage that is much more adaptable and flexible to the changing seasons of life, and sometimes the unpredictable things that life throws at us. So again, I know that that is not what the church officially teaches, but I simply offer it as a thought exercise and would like to ask, why is that approach not reasonable? Aside from the fact that it's the way we've always taught it, and ancient theologians and doctors of the church like Augustine and Thomas said no. Beyond that, what's the actual explanation for why the approach that I've laid out is simply not right or incompatible with natural law and our just general fundamental beliefs in God and how we are created to be in the Ten Commandments? So I offer that. I welcome any discussion on that, links, sources, things like that. But I think for the most part, the answers are going to be, well, the church has always taught something different, and you have to accept that. Okay, all right, if that's it, then that's it. Like, let's just be honest and say it's simply because it's always been that way, and we don't really have a good explanation for it beyond that. If that's it, fine. Let's just be honest and transparent about it. But if there's something more than that, if there is a, if we were just had a fresh slate and we were deciding this issue for the first time, what would be the arguments against the proposition that I've laid out? I'd like people, genuinely like people, to lay that out for us and explain it. So anyway, want to throw that out there. I appreciate anyone who sees this and engages in the comments, follows any, offers any suggestions or criticisms or whatever. Please do so respectfully. I do want this to be a place that people can dialogue and debate and tackle difficult issues, while at the same time maintaining our charity and respect for each other. So appreciate everyone for listening. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.